Hey guys, in case you haven't heard, we have gotten confirmation for our Final Fantasy VII units, and among these units is Barret. Now, I see Barret as a big win for representation in terms of minority characters. He is basically one of the best Final Fantasy minority characters, if not one of the greatest video game minority characters that we've seen thus far. So I am super happy to see him included as part of the collaboration. And before I proceed any further, I just want to make note that I know this is a little bit of a touchy subject, and I want to try to be as careful as I can while also being casual at the same time. I'm not offended in any way by the small amount of minority characters, and I don't really blame Gumi for, they can make whatever game they want. I don't really blame them for not including minority characters. It's just how they design characters, and I am completely fine with that. So I thought it would be fun to kind of just go over characters that I perceive as possible minorities and sort of just review certain features about them. So what I'm going to review is I'm going to review each character based on four elements. One is their background story. One would be their personality as a character. Number three would be features, which will be like facial features and like visual features. And number four is just going to be unit strength overall. So our first character here is Vinera. So based on her background story, I'm not a super big fan of her background story. She was born to a poor village. She kind of was taken under Moraga's wing, and she sort of became the false princess of Venice. However, if you kind of view this from the Horn perspective, she is actually technically the princess of Venice. Like, there's really no other arguing about that. So, from that perspective, it's really cool that they made her a princess and that she gets to basically marry into royalty because of her status. And so, going into the next feature here is her personality. She's a very strong willed and caring character. So, as we kind of saw in the story, she sort of has like a change of heart. And even though there was this evil plot to assassinate Dario, she kind of just changed her heart, and she's shown as a very caring person. She's grown to love Dario, and you can kind of see her as somebody who has values, and she's not necessarily just a single-minded person. So going into her appearance, I feel like they made her purposely ambiguous. And the reason I say that is because I sort of see features from different cultures built into her character. The first thing I kind of notice is her hair. She's kind of got this whole Asian, if you look at her headpiece on top of her hair, to me, this sort of looks like an Eastern Asian sort of cultural thing. She also has features of a South Asian and sort of like a Middle Eastern. And going by her name, Vinera, that sounds very Latino to me. So I see her sort of a conglomeration of a bunch of different features from some different cultures. And one other thing I wanted to note is sort of how her face is a little bit lighter than her legs. Uh, I don't know if that was necessarily done on purpose, but that sort of gave me slightly a little bit of a geisha vibe. I don't know if you really want to count that. If we look at her winter uh, unit version, the only thing I wanted to point out there was that she's actually lighter skinned here, and us dark skinned people, we tend to lose our tan over the winter. So that's something I kind of wanted to point out. Don't know if it was necessarily done on purpose, but that's kind of something that to me kind of stood out. In terms of her unit, she is our first assassin in the game, and she stands out to me as an evasion unit and very versatile. So she is to me, a very good unit. So in terms of rating, I would like to give her a 9 out of 10 in total representation score. So moving on, I would like to talk about Phoebe. So Phoebe's background isn't really that fully fleshed out from her little story bio. We see that she sort of escaped from her war-torn homeland. She's kind of seeking help to kind of try to save her hometown. But it kind of seems like she might be a little bit too late to save her hometown. So to me, this is kind of a weak background. And it's sort of similar in the sense of Vinera, that we don't really know what her background, her hometown is sort of like. They're kind of like helpless and sort of poor. Like that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. So not the greatest background there. Personality, we don't really have much of a personality since she hasn't really appeared in the story. So I can't really give her anything based on that. In terms of appearance, you can see that she sort of has the dark wavy hair. So that kind of just goes in line with being a dark-skinned character. A lot of times in video games, we don't really see the right kind of hairstyle with a dark-skinned character. We usually see like a straight hairstyle or something that wasn't really thought of, like maybe like a generic dreads or something like that. But the fact that her hair is at least slightly wavy kind of adds to the whole her being a minority character, and to me, I will approve her as being a minority character. So the last thing I wanted to mention is, as a unit, she is a very good time mage and healer, especially for an SR unit. She has been used definitely in my teams in class match, and she has helped me go very far in that. So I will actually give her a 7 out of 10. She's only losing points for basically for her background and for lack of personality. So otherwise, I'd probably give her a 9 or a 10 or an 8. An 8 or a 9 is what I meant to say. So moving on to our next character, we have Rhaldor. So Rhaldor's background is pretty solid. He's the commander of the Rhaldor Division Crucium. His personality is a strong-willed leader. We know that he hates guns, and he is actually very honorable. So by the end of his storyline, he did sort of acknowledge gun users as being good to have on in the army, basically. I did like that he sort of like hates guns, so that kind of gives him a little bit more depth as a commander. He's sort of like an in-your-face, and that's kind of why I say he's honorable. He's sort of like an in-your-face fighter, bare hands, quote unquote. We do know that we do have fist weapons, but he's sort of a bare hands martial arts fighter type of person. In terms of appearance, I almost didn't want to give him the minority just because he has that sort of goth rocker look. And it kind of makes me think of someone like David Bowie, and it kind of made me think like his skin color might be more of a discoloration than anything else. But I looked at Rairu as well, and he has sort of that similar face, similar eyeliner, similar like rocker goth look. So I was like, okay, since they made Rairu like the pale skin version, I'm gonna give Rhaldor the sort of, darker skinned, and I'm gonna count him as a minority. So hair wise, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if they sort of went for a specific culture, but we have to remember this is a video game, and it's just in a world where it doesn't necessarily have to match our world here in real life. In terms of unit, he's the first good attacking strike unit. So, and he's also big and tanky. So that's sort of what he's known for. He's a very strong unit. I guess mostly on defense, but he's still also a very good attacker. So I definitely think he's a good unit. I don't personally have him myself, but he looks like he's a very good unit. So my score overall is an 8.5 out of 10. And the only reason I took off like half a point there was just because of the ambiguous rocker goth look, which I kind of talked about already. So, I kind of just took it off anyway, just because I don't think it was super well, okay, I'll just leave it at that. Our next unit here is Camillo. His background is he actually is from the Heindler kingdom, and I looked this up in the story. But he's sort of working under Rhaldor, just I guess because Rhaldor is kind of taking over Heindler. So again, we have the theme of the dark-skinned characters being from sort of the kingdoms that aren't as strong. Uh, his personality is a little, it's a little. So I put him down as borderline problematic, but at least he's lovable. The whole sort of being aggressive, charming, and being aggressive is kind of a little borderline to me. Um, However, he is a very lovable character, and as we see in the story, he basically wears his heart in his sleeve. He says kind of what he feels, and he does have good intentions. Um, so he definitely has a Latino sounding name. His hairstyle is sort of maybe a Central American or South American. And his qualities are, again, I kind of mentioned this whole charming thing. A little bit stereotypical there, but again, he's a very lovable character, and I feel like he has good intentions. So I'm not gonna really fault Lumi for that, but it kind of is what it is. His strength as a character is that he is the first selection quest character, and he actually does seem pretty versatile. I believe he has 3 attack types, but don't quote me on that because he's not actually out in global, so I can't really say that. Uh, in terms of a score, I'm gonna give him an 8 out of 10. He is a good character, but I am sort of taking off a point for this whole borderline problematic thing. Okay, so continuing onward is our next character is a little bit of a person that I almost forgot about because as we can see here in the art, his skin is much lighter than his actual skin in the original game. And if you look at his 3D model, he actually is much darker than what he is here. So his background is sort of he's got abandonment issues because his dad left him, and he's also a sports star. Um, I'm not gonna comment on anything in terms of that being part of his character, his minority status, but like I think that's sort of a solid background story. Uh, in terms of personality, he is very caring, and throughout FF10, he sort of, I get the feeling that he just wants to be accepted by everyone. I guess he sort of had a little bit of a bad childhood where he feels abandoned, basically, like I mentioned. Uh, and I guess it's tough for him to make friends and things like that. Um, Appearance wise, he's got that spiky bowl cut, which kind of makes me think he's maybe like Polynesian or not necessarily like, Japanese or Chinese, but maybe Filipino, Thai, Vietnamese, something like that. Um, and as I mentioned before, the artwork here is a little bit lighter than it should be, and I kind of take off points for that a little bit. Uh, in terms of his unit, he's part of the first batch of the EX units, so that's by default going to make him really strong and a very usable unit, which is a good thing. And he's a main character of one of the Final Fantasies, so that is definitely a good quality to have as a unit in War of the Visions. And so, in terms of score, what I'm going to give him is an 8 out of 10. I'm definitely taking off that point for the whole lightening his art style. So, moving onward, we're going to talk about the man himself, Barret. And as you can see, I have a coming soon. This is the best picture I could find of him. So we kind of already have his background from Final Fantasy VII. He's sort of a freedom fighter. He's sort of the leader of the small group of Avalanche soldiers. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but we'll go with soldiers. His personality is he does tend to be hot-headed at times. He is very caring, as in he cares for his friends. Through the story of Final Fantasy VII, we we do learn that he cares about both his Avalanche group and, you know, Cloud, Tifa, etc. our group that we get to play as. And he also has a lot of leadership qualities. In terms of appearance, he does have a very good appearance. He has almost like a standard Black American, African American hairstyle where it's a fade and he's got the hair on top. He does have a beard, which is very much what I would consider to be someone that looks like myself. The only thing I would give him is that his hair is a little bit on the straight side. And if you kind of look at his artwork through the various games and appearances, he does have a subtle Asian look, which is not bad or good. I just see that as, you know, the Japanese artists as sort of just drawing him in a way where it seems familiar to them. So I will not take off any points for that. It's very, very subtle. You probably don't notice it unless you look really, really hard. In terms of unit, he is a big and tanky unit. And in War of the Visions, we're sort of finding out that he is going to be an up-close ranged unit, which is kind of interesting because it's versatile. It's not what we expect. But at the same time, him being close up makes his tankiness be very, you know, it makes it make sense. You know, he's tanky and he's close up, so that is actually going to be helpful in terms of setting up your team in War of the Visions. It doesn't make sense to have a tanky, long range unit. So, and the last thing I wanted to mention is that he is indeed a UR unit. As people have mentioned in other FFBE games, he has not necessarily been the best unit, but I think with the remake, he has just been made into a much more fleshed out, much stronger character. So I think that's probably part of the reason why they went with that here in War of the Visions. So I think Barret is going to be our last definite minority character, and he is going to get a score of 9.5 out of 10. The only reason I didn't give him a 10 out of 10 is because nothing is perfect, but he is definitely one of the best minority characters in basically all of video games, so I gotta give him a good score for that. Alright, and the last part I wanted to talk about were Rhaldor and Moraga. Now, compared to the other character portraits, their portraits are both a little bit darker than the standard character. However, looking at their 3D models, I just wasn't really sure if I wanted to count them. And just also them being part of sort of the villains of the story, I sort of didn't really want to count them. But I will give Rhaldor that she does have a fun personality, and I do really like her as a character. Moraga, I also wanted to point out that I think he's more of a shadowy person, more so than a dark-skinned person. If you look at his 3D model, you can see he has lighter tones and then sort of like a shadowiness around him. That's just my opinion. I don't know if you guys want to disagree about that or not. Please just let me know if you disagree or if you think anything else. And last but not least, this is going to be a very small one, but I wanted to mention that Gilgamesh actually has a darker skin tone than the average character. But again, look at his eyes, they're surrounded by darkness, and he also has this godlike thing about him, so I'm not really sure if he necessarily will be counted. He has sort of like this godlike personality, so he doesn't really have like much of a personality, and we don't really know much about his background that well, so I'm not gonna count that. So what do you guys think? Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with that, and let me know if you think I left anyone out or if anyone should not be included. Alright guys, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.